He's gone. We need to leave now." The words, so softly spoken yet so urgent, cut through the noise of O'Hare International Airport like a knife. Eleanor Baker turned to look at her 7-year-old granddaughter, Emma, whose small hand suddenly gripped hers with surprising strength. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" Eleanor asked, watching her son Jason's plane taxi away from the gate. "We just said goodbye to your dad. He'll be back from London in a week." But Emma's eyes weren't on the departing plane. They were fixed on something or someone behind them, her normally cheerful face suddenly pale and serious. "We have to go. Grandma Eleanor, now." Her voice trembled slightly, but her grip remained firm as she tugged toward the exit. Eleanor had spent 68 years developing the habit of listening to children when they spoke with such conviction. Something in her tone, an echo of her father's decisiveness, made Eleanor glance casually over her shoulder as if checking the departure board. 2 men in dark suits stood near the security checkpoint, their attention fixed unmistakably on them. Nothing in their appearance was overtly threatening, yet something about their stance, the deliberate way they surveyed the terminal while maintaining awareness of Eleanor and Emma's position, triggered a long-dormant alarm in her mind. "All right, let's get to the car," she agreed, adjusting her handbag on her shoulder and guiding Emma toward the exit with forced casualness. "It's getting late anyway." They moved through the crowded terminal at a measured pace, not too fast to draw attention, but with clear purpose. Emma stayed close to Eleanor's side, her favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whiskers, clutched tightly to her chest. "Are they following us? Grandma?" she whispered as they stepped onto the escalator leading to the parking garage. Eleanor resisted the urge to look back. "How did you know about those men, Emma?" "Daddy said they might come." Her voice was barely audible over the ambient noise of the airport. "He said if I saw men in dark suits watching us after he left, I should tell you we need to leave right away." A chill ran through Eleanor. Jason, her practical, rational son who worked as a financial director at Global Meridian Investments, had never been prone to paranoia or melodrama. If he had warned his daughter about potential watchers, he must have had serious reasons. The parking garage was half empty, their sedan parked in a row of vehicles on the 3rd level. As they approached, Eleanor casually scanned the area, spotting a dark SUV with tinted windows idling 2 rows over. The driver appeared to be speaking into a phone or radio. "Emma," she said quietly, "did your father tell you anything else? Anything I should know?" She nodded solemnly. "He said if the bad men came, I should give you Mr. Whiskers. He has something special inside." She hesitated. "And Daddy said not to use our phones. They can listen." Eleanor unlocked the car, helping Emma into the back seat and securing her seatbelt before walking around to the driver's side. Through the rearview mirror, she saw the elevator doors open, revealing the 2 men from the terminal. Decades of teaching high school history hadn't prepared Eleanor for this moment, but the years she'd spent as a single mother after her husband's early death had taught her one crucial lesson when protecting family. Hesitation is your worst enemy. She started the engine and pulled out of the parking space, driving normally toward the exit. The SUV she'd noticed earlier also began moving, falling into position several cars behind them. At the payment booth, Eleanor handed over cash rather than using the credit card she normally would have a decision prompted by Emma's warning about phones. If they could listen to calls, electronic payments would leave an equally clear trail. As they merged onto the highway, Eleanor made a split-second decision to avoid their usual route home to the Chicago suburbs. Instead, she took the exit for downtown, entering the maze of the city where they might lose their followers in the evening traffic. "Emma," she said, keeping her voice calm while checking the mirrors constantly, "I need you to give me Mr. Whiskers now." She passed the worn stuffed rabbit forward, its once white fur now gray with years of love. "Daddy said you'd need to look inside the special pocket. I'll hand him back. Hold him for now. When we get somewhere safe, I'll look." "Are we in danger, Grandma?" she asked, her voice small and shaky. Eleanor met Emma's eyes in the rearview mirror, noticing tears beginning to form. The little girl was trying to be brave, but fear was winning out. "I'm not sure yet, sweetheart," Eleanor answered honestly. "But your father clearly wanted us to be careful, so that's what we're going to do. The SUV remained several cars behind them, too consistent to be coincidence. Eleanor made a series of random turns through city streets, confirming her suspicion when it adjusted course to match their seemingly erratic path. Emma sniffled in the back seat. "I'm scared," she whispered. "That's okay, honey. It's okay to be scared, but I'm right here with you, and I won't let anything happen to you." Eleanor pulled into the underground parking garage of a large downtown hotel, driving to the lowest level before finding a space partially obscured by a concrete pillar. After turning off the engine, she sat still for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Let me see Mr. Whiskers now, Emma." The little girl handed her the stuffed rabbit, watching intently as Eleanor examined it. A small, nearly invisible seam ran along its back, different from the factory stitching. She carefully pulled it open, revealing a hidden pocket. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note in Jason's precise handwriting, "Mom, if you're reading this, it means we're all in danger. I couldn't tell you directly. They're watching me too closely. I've uncovered financial evidence of massive corruption and illegal weapons deals at Global Meridian. The USB contains proof, but it's encrypted. Do not go home. Do not use credit cards or phones. They have resources everywhere. Go to the public library downtown. In the history section, find American Century by Evan's dad's favorite. Page 187 has the next instructions. Trust no one except Thomas Walker at the Chicago Tribune. He's expecting the evidence. I'm sorry to put you and Emma in this position. Keep her safe. I'll contact you when I can. Love." Jason Eleanor folded the note and slipped it into her pocket along with the USB drive, her hands shaking slightly as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Her son, always the most cautious and ethical person she knew, had apparently stumbled onto something dangerous enough to send him fleeing the country and to turn his mother and daughter into fugitives. "What did Daddy say?" Emma asked, her young face streaked with tears. "That we need to be very brave," Eleanor replied, starting the car again. "And that we have a very important mission." As they exited the parking garage through a different ramp, Eleanor caught sight of the black SUV circling the hotel entrance, searching for them. They had gained a temporary advantage, but she knew it wouldn't last long. For 40 years, she'd been Eleanor Baker Widow, history teacher, grandmother, a woman whose greatest adventures had been lived vicariously through books. Now, in the space of 30 minutes, she had become something else entirely, a guardian of dangerous secrets, a runner from unnamed threats, protector of both her granddaughter and whatever explosive truth her son had risked everything to expose. The Chicago evening spread before them, its familiar skyline suddenly seeming alien and full of potential threats. Eleanor checked the mirrors one more time and set course for the downtown public library, wondering how many other ordinary lives had been upended by a single whispered warning. "He's gone. We need to leave now." 6 simple words that had changed everything. In a sleek office on the 42nd floor of the Global Meridian Investments building, Victor Harmon replaced his phone in its cradle, a rare frown marring his usually controlled features. The head of corporate security didn't appreciate complications, particularly ones involving a 7-year-old girl and a retirement-age woman. "What do you mean you lost them?" he asked the man standing before his desk, his voice dangerously soft. "They went into downtown traffic, sir. The woman knows what she's doing, executed several evasive maneuvers. Went into a hotel garage but must have exited through another level." Victor drummed his fingers on the polished surface of his desk. "The tracker. Dead signal 15 minutes ago. She must have found it somehow." "Impossible," Victor muttered, more to himself than his subordinate. "It was professionally installed this morning while she was in the grocery store." He swiveled his chair to face the wall of screens behind him, each displaying security camera footage, financial data streams, and personnel files. He tapped a command, bringing up an image of Eleanor Baker, 68 years old, retired history teacher, widow of James Baker, mother of Jason Baker. Nothing in her background suggested she would have the skills to evade professional surveillance. Unless, he pulled up Jason Baker's file, studying it intently. Unless the son prepared her, gave her instructions. "Should we put out a wider alert, sir?" the subordinate asked. Victor shook his head. No. Too many questions would be raised. We keep this contained for now. He considered his next move carefully. They can't go home. Jason would have warned them about that. They have no credit cards, no phones. They're limited to where they can go. A thin smile crossed his face. Start checking hotels in a 5-mile radius of where we lost them. Cash payments. Older woman with young girl. And get me the library security footage. Public places would be their next logical step. As his subordinate left, Victor turned his attention back to Jason Baker's file. The quiet, methodical financial director had proven unexpectedly resourceful. Victor had underestimated him once. He wouldn't make that mistake with the mother. The Chicago Public Library stood like a fortress of knowledge against the darkening sky, its massive stone facade illuminated by strategically placed lights. Under different circumstances, Eleanor would have appreciated its grandeur. Tonight, it represented only a temporary haven, a place to find the next breadcrumb in whatever trail Jason had left for them. She parked 2 blocks away in a public garage, paying cash again, before leaving the car. She rummaged through the emergency bag she kept in the trunk, a habit formed during harsh Midwestern winters, finding a baseball cap and light jacket for herself and a hooded sweatshirt for Emma. "We're going to play a game," she told Emma as they walked toward the library, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "We're going to pretend to be different people for a little while, like actors in a play," Emma nodded solemnly. "Because of the bad men." "Yes, sweetheart, just to be safe." "I can be Elsa," she declared, referring to her favorite character from the movies she watched endlessly. "And I can be Anna," Eleanor supplied, grateful for her ability to frame their situation as an adventure rather than a nightmare. "Sisters stick together, right?" Emma's small hand squeezed hers in agreement as they climbed the library steps. Inside, the cavernous main hall buzzed with the quiet energy of evening patrons, students hunched over laptops, elderly men reading newspapers, young professionals browsing new releases. They blended into this tableau of normality, just a grandmother and granddaughter visiting the library on a weeknight. The history section occupied most of the 3rd floor, rows of shelves creating a labyrinth of knowledge spanning centuries and continents. Eleanor moved with purpose, years of teaching history giving her an intuitive sense of where to look. American history, mid-20th century. There it would be. "American Century" by Evans, she murmured, running her fingers along the spines until she found it a thick volume with a faded dust jacket showing the iconic image of Times Square on VJ Day. Her late husband James had indeed loved this book, keeping a copy in his study throughout their marriage. Jason's reference wasn't random. He was using family knowledge as security, information that wouldn't appear in any database mining of their personal details. She pulled the volume from the shelf and turned to page 187, her heart racing. There, tucked between pages detailing the Marshall Plan, was a small envelope. She slipped it into her pocket without examining its contents, returned the book to its place, and guided Emma toward the children's section. "Can we get some books, Grandma?" she asked as they passed colorful displays. "Not today, sweetheart. We need to keep moving." Eleanor softened the denial with a gentle squeeze of her shoulder. "But maybe you could choose one for me to tell you about later from memory." While Emma deliberated between picture books displayed on a revolving rack, Eleanor found a quiet corner and quickly examined the envelope's contents. Inside was a small key, old-fashioned, possibly for a safety deposit box, and another note in Jason's handwriting. "First National Bank, Box 1547. Access code is Dad's birthday plus Emma's. Go tomorrow morning when it opens. Inside is everything Miller needs. Tonight, stay somewhere unexpected. They'll check hotels under your name and credit cards. The password for the USB whiskers. And honey 2016. Be careful. Mom, these people have resources and connections everywhere. Trust your instincts." Eleanor memorized the contents before tearing the note into tiny pieces and disposing of them in separate trash bins throughout the library. The key went into the small zippered pocket inside her handbag alongside the USB drive. As she returned to the children's section, a movement near the elevator caught her attention, a man in a dark suit speaking quietly into his wrist, his eyes scanning the floor with methodical precision. Her pulse quickened. They had found them more quickly than she'd anticipated. Emma was still engrossed in the picture books, unaware of the danger. Eleanor approached her casually, bending down as if to see her selection. "We need to leave now through the back stairs," she whispered, gesturing toward the emergency exit at the far end of the floor. "Remember, we're still playing our game. Walk normally but quickly." Emma's eyes widened with fear, and for a moment, Eleanor worried the child might freeze or call attention to them with tears. Instead, Emma clutched Mr. Whiskers tighter and nodded, her small face setting with determination despite the quiver in her lip. The emergency exit opened onto a stairwell that descended all the way to the basement level. They hurried down, the sound of their footsteps echoing despite Eleanor's attempts at quietness. At the bottom, a service corridor led to a loading dock where library staff were unloading boxes from a delivery van. Eleanor guided Emma past them with a confident nod as if they belonged, emerging onto a side street away from the main entrance. Night had fully descended now, the city transformed into a landscape of shadows and artificial light. "Where are we going, Grandma?" Emma asked as they walked briskly away from the library, her small legs working double time to keep pace. A good question. One Eleanor was still answering herself. They couldn't go home. Jason had been clear about that. Hotels required ID and credit cards. Friends or other family members would be obvious places for these people with resources to look. Then she remembered Maria Alvarez, a former student who had become a friend over the years. She managed a small apartment building in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood on the west side, catering to new immigrants and visiting relatives who sometimes needed accommodation without paperwork or questions. "We're going to visit a friend," Eleanor told Emma, flagging down a taxi at the corner. "Someone who can help us." In the taxi, she gave the driver an address 3 blocks from Maria's building, unwilling to leave a direct trail. Emma leaned against her, fatigue finally catching up with her after the stress and excitement of their escape. "You're being so brave," Eleanor whispered, stroking her hair. "Your dad would be proud." "Is Daddy in trouble?" she asked, her voice muffled against Eleanor's side. "He's trying to fix something that's wrong," Eleanor answered carefully. "Sometimes doing the right thing can be dangerous, but it's still important to do it." Emma nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Like in Harry Potter when they have to fight Voldemort even though it's scary." "Exactly like that," Eleanor agreed, marveling at how children could often distill complex moral situations to their essence. Maria's building was a modest 3-story walk-up on a street lined with similar structures, their facades brightened by window boxes and cultural touches that transformed institutional architecture into homes. The neighborhood hummed with evening life families chatting on stoops, music drifting from open windows, the scent of various cuisines mingling in the air. Maria answered her door with surprise that quickly shifted to concern as she took in their appearance and the urgency in Eleanor's eyes. "Eleanor, what brings you here so late and with the little one, too?" "Maria, I need a favor," Eleanor said quietly. "We need a place to stay tonight, somewhere no one would think to look for us. And I need to borrow your laptop, if possible." To her credit, Maria asked no questions beyond what was necessary. Within 20 minutes, they were settled in a small but clean studio apartment on the 3rd floor, typically used for visiting relatives. She brought them a laptop, some basic toiletries, and a bag of food from her own kitchen. "Whatever trouble you're in, Eleanor, you know you can trust me," she said at the door. "It's better if you don't know the details," Eleanor replied, touched by her unhesitating help. "But thank you. We won't stay long just tonight." After Maria left, Eleanor made a simple dinner from the food she'd provided, watching Emma eat with relief. Children were remarkably resilient, but they still needed the basics: food, rest, and a sense of security, however provisional. Once Emma was tucked into bed, Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest. Eleanor sat at the small table by the window and inserted the USB drive into Maria's laptop. A single encrypted file appeared, requesting a password. She typed in Whiskers and Honey 2016 and held her breath. The file opened, revealing hundreds of documents, financial records, emails, meeting transcripts, and photographs. Eleanor wasn't a financial expert, but even to her untrained eye, the evidence was damning. Global Meridian Investments had apparently been facilitating money laundering for several drug cartels and terrorist organizations. disguising the transactions as legitimate investments while skimming millions in fees. Worse, they had been financing weapons deals to conflict zones under embargo, using humanitarian aid organizations as fronts. Names of high-ranking executives appeared throughout, including several who held positions in regulatory bodies and government agencies. The corruption wasn't just within the company, it had metastasized into the very systems designed to prevent such activities. No wonder Jason had fled. No wonder he couldn't risk direct communication. The people implicated in these documents had everything to lose if this information became public. Eleanor closed the files and removed the USB drive, her hands trembling slightly. Tomorrow they would need to access the safety deposit box and then find this Thomas Walker at the Chicago Tribune. But for tonight, their only job was to rest and remain hidden. From the bed, Emma's voice drifted softly through the darkness. "Grandma, are we going to be okay?" Eleanor moved to sit beside her, brushing the hair from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. Your dad trusted us with something very important, and we're going to help him make things right." Emma nodded sleepily, already drifting off. "I knew you would know what to do. Daddy said you were the bravest person he ever knew." The words caught Eleanor by surprise, a warm counterpoint to the fear and uncertainty that had dominated the evening. In Jason's eyes, apparently, she wasn't just a retired history teacher who made good cookies and remembered birthdays. She was someone capable of facing danger, of protecting what mattered when everything was at stake. As she returned to her vigil by the window, watching the street below for any sign of unusual activity, Eleanor wondered if he was right. Bravery had never been how she would have described herself. Practical, perhaps, determined, resilient, but brave. The night stretched before them, filled with unknowns. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, in this small apartment far from their comfortable suburban existence, Eleanor made a silent promise to her absent son and the sleeping child who trusted her so completely. She would become whatever this situation required: brave, cunning, resourceful. The people hunting them might have resources and connections, but she had something more powerful, a lifetime of underestimation as an elderly woman and the fierce, uncompromising love of a grandmother protecting her family. They wouldn't see her coming, and that would be their mistake. Dawn broke over Chicago, painting the city skyline in shades of amber and gold that belied the danger lurking in its streets. Eleanor had slept fitfully, jerking awake at every distant siren or raised voice from the street below. Now, watching Emma sleep peacefully with Mr. Whiskers tucked under her chin, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of doubt. Was she truly equipped for this? At 68, her expertise lay in explaining the Treaty of Versailles to restless teenagers, not outmaneuvering corporate assassins. Yet here she was, planning their approach to a bank as if it were a military operation, all based on cryptic instructions from her son who was now halfway across the Atlantic. Emma stirred, her eyes opening with that peculiar clarity children sometimes possess upon waking. No gradual transition, just an immediate presence. "Are we going to see Daddy today?" she asked, sitting up and rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Not today, sweetheart," Eleanor answered, helping her out of bed. "Today, we're going to follow the next clue your father left us. Like a treasure hunt. Exactly. With the key you found in the book." Maria had slipped a bag outside their door containing fresh clothes for both of them, simple practical items that would help them blend into the city crowd. There was also a note informing Eleanor she had called in a favor from her cousin who drove a taxi. He would take them wherever they needed to go. No questions asked. By 8:30, they were in her cousin Ramon's taxi, heading toward the downtown financial district. Eleanor had explained to Emma the importance of their game, continuing. They would use different names, avoid drawing attention, and most importantly, she should never mention her father or why they were really at the bank. "If anyone asks, we're just getting some of Grandma's special jewelry out of the box," Eleanor told her as the taxi navigated morning traffic. "Can you remember that?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm good at remembering things. Daddy says I have an elephant's memory." First National Bank occupied a limestone building that exuded stability and tradition, attributes that had once seemed reassuring, but now felt like a facade concealing darker truths. How many other transactions within these respectable walls served purposes like those documented in Jason's files? Ramon agreed to wait for them, finding a spot near a coffee shop across the street. Eleanor took Emma's hand as they ascended the broad stone steps, consciously adjusting her posture to project confidence rather than the apprehension churning inside her. The lobby bustled with morning activity tellers serving early customers, business people making deposits, security guards casually surveying the space. Eleanor approached the information desk where a young woman greeted them with a professional smile. "Good morning. How may I help you today?" "I need to access my safety deposit box, please," Eleanor said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Number 1547. "Of course. May I see your identification?" Eleanor presented her driver's license, breathing an internal sigh of relief when the woman merely glanced at it before typing something into her computer. If the people pursuing them had already flagged her identification, they would know very soon. "Thank you, Mrs. Baker. And I see this box has a registered access code." "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, combining the two dates as Jason had instructed. 06152409, her husband's birthday, June 15th, followed by Emma's, September 24th. Another piece of family knowledge that wouldn't appear in any financial database. The woman nodded and directed them to a seating area while a bank officer was summoned to escort them to the vault. Emma sat quietly beside Eleanor, swinging her legs and clutching Mr. Whiskers, the picture of innocence. Eleanor scanned the lobby carefully, noting each person who entered, alert for dark suits or suspicious glances. A middle-aged man in a tailored gray suit approached them after a few minutes. "Mrs. Baker, I'm Mr. Daniels. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to your box." They followed him through a secured door and down a corridor to the vault area. The massive steel door stood open during business hours, revealing rows of metal boxes embedded in the walls. Another employee verified Eleanor's identification and access code before Mr. Daniels used his key in conjunction with hers to remove box 1547. "You can use this private room," he said, placing the long metal container on a table in a small adjoining space. "Take as much time as you need. Just press the button when you're finished." When the door closed behind him, Eleanor immediately opened the box. Inside was a sealed manila envelope, a prepaid cell phone, and a thick stack of cash secured with a rubber band. She quickly counted the money, $10,000 in various denominations, before turning her attention to the envelope. The contents were sparse, but significant: a formal letter from Jason to Thomas Walker at the Chicago Tribune authorizing the release of all documents, a USB drive labeled Backup Original Documents, and a handwritten note addressed to Eleanor Mom. "If you've made it this far, they're definitely after you. The backup USB contains the same files plus originals I couldn't risk leaving on the first drive. Take everything to Walker immediately. He's expecting you today. The prepaid phone has one number programmed a secure line that will reach me eventually. Use it only in absolute emergency as it can be traced after activation. After delivering everything to Walker, take Emma and leave Chicago. Use the cash for transportation and accommodations. Avoid planes or trains where ID is required. There's a cabin in Michigan that Dad and I used to visit, the fishing place on Cedar Lake. Remember it? The key is still hidden under the same rock by the back door. Go there and wait for my contact. I'm so sorry for putting you through this. I never intended for either of you to be involved, but when I realized how deep this went and how closely I was being watched, I had no choice. Tell Emma I love her more than anything." Jason Eleanor folded the note and placed it in her pocket, then gathered everything else into her handbag. Emma watched her with curious eyes but asked no questions, seeming to understand instinctively that this was the serious part of their game. "Did you find the treasure?" she whispered as Eleanor closed the empty box. "We found the next clue," Eleanor replied softly. "And now we need to deliver it to a special person who can help your daddy." She pressed the button to summon Mr. Daniels, using the brief waiting period to compose herself. They were halfway through Jason's trail of breadcrumbs, moving steadily toward whatever endgame he had planned. But if her years teaching history had taught Eleanor anything, it was that the most dangerous moment often comes not at the beginning of a revolution, but when its success begins to seem possible. Victor Harmon slammed his coffee mug down on his desk, barely noticing as the hot liquid splashed onto his immaculate suit sleeve. The surveillance footage from the bank security camera was unmistakable. Eleanor Baker and her granddaughter had just entered First National Bank. "Got them," he muttered, pressing the intercom. "Team 1, move to First National on State Street. The Baker woman and the child are inside, likely accessing a safety deposit box." He paced his office, mind racing. If Jason Baker had hidden evidence in a safety deposit box, it meant the situation was even worse than he'd feared. The board had assured him that the leak was contained, that no physical evidence existed outside their systems. "Sir," his assistant interrupted via the intercom, "Chicago Tribune just called our PR department requesting comment on allegations of money laundering and illegal weapons deals." Victor froze, then quickly recovered. "Standard denial. Tell them we have no knowledge of any such activities and that we're confident any investigation would exonerate Global Meridian completely." He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Jason Baker had played them perfectly, using his mother and daughter as couriers while he fled the country, presumably with additional copies of the evidence. Now Victor needed to intercept whatever was coming out of that safety deposit box before it reached the press. "I'm going to First National myself," he informed his assistant as he strode toward the elevator. "Have Smith and Jones meet me there, and contact our people at the regulatory agencies. We need to start damage control immediately. Gee." The Chicago Tribune offices were only 15 blocks away. As they left the bank and returned to Ramon's waiting taxi, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that somewhere in the morning crowd, eyes were tracking their movement, calculating their destination, preparing to intercept them before they could deliver the evidence that would blow apart a carefully constructed criminal enterprise. "Where to now, Mrs. Alvarez?" Ramon asked, using Maria's surname for Eleanor as instructed. "The Tribune building, please," she replied, settling Emma beside her in the back seat. "And if you notice anyone following us, please take evasive action." Ramon's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, a flash of understanding passing between them. "Certainly, Senora. I know this city better than the rats know the sewers. No one will follow us for long." As they pulled away from the curb, Eleanor held Emma's hand tightly, drawing strength from her trust. The next hour would determine whether Jason's dangerous gambit would succeed, or whether all three of them would become casualties of corporate corruption too powerful to challenge. "Grandma," Emma asked quietly as they navigated through the mid-morning traffic. "I'm hungry," the simple request, so normal amid their extraordinary circumstances, almost made Eleanor laugh. "Of course you are, sweetheart. We'll get something to eat as soon as we finish our errand." She looked out the window, noticing with alarm a black SUV 2 cars behind them. "Ramon, I think we might have company." Ramon nodded, making a sudden turn down a narrow side street. "Hold on, ladies." He executed a series of sudden turns, doubling back on one-way streets, and even briefly pulling into a hotel parking garage, only to exit through a different ramp. Through it all, Emma remained calm, treating the evasive driving as part of their adventure rather than a desperate attempt to lose potential pursuers. "I think we're clear," Ramon finally announced, his eyes constantly checking his mirrors as they approached the imposing Tribune Tower. "But I will circle the block after I drop you off, just to be certain." "Thank you," Eleanor said, meaning it more deeply than the simple words could convey. "We shouldn't be long, an hour at most." "I will be waiting, Senora. Maria would never forgive me if I abandoned her favorite teacher." The Gothic architecture of the Tribune building had always impressed Eleanor during previous visits to downtown, its flying buttresses and ornate stonework reminiscent of medieval European cathedrals. Today, it represented something more immediate potential salvation. Holding Emma's hand firmly, Eleanor approached the security desk in the lobby, conscious of the precious cargo in her handbag. "I have an appointment with Thomas Walker," she told the guard, trying to project casual confidence rather than the nervous energy thrumming through her. The guard checked a computer screen. "I don't see anything scheduled." Eleanor's heart sank. Had Jason's arrangement somehow fallen through before she could respond? The guard's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then looked up at Eleanor with new interest. "Are you Mrs. Baker?" She nodded, suddenly wary. Mr. Walker says to send you up immediately. 18th floor, suite 1823. Relief flooded through Eleanor as the guard issued temporary visitor badges and directed them to the elevator bank. Inside the elevator, Emma looked up at her with curious eyes. Is this the person who's going to help Daddy? I hope so, sweetheart, Eleanor replied, straightening the girl's jacket and smoothing her hair, small maternal gestures that comforted herself as much as Emma. Remember, we need to be careful about what we say. The 18th floor housed the investigative reporting department, a maze of cubicles and glass-walled offices humming with activity. A young assistant met them at the elevator and escorted them directly to a corner office where a man in his early 40s stood waiting. His shirt sleeves rolled up and tie loosened the universal uniform of journalists on deadline. Mrs. Baker, he said, extending his hand. Thomas Walker. I've been expecting you, though I was beginning to worry. We had to take certain precautions, Eleanor explained, shaking his hand before introducing Emma. Walker's expression softened as he greeted her granddaughter, offering her a juice box from a small refrigerator in his office before turning back to Eleanor with renewed seriousness. Jason contacted me 3 weeks ago. He explained once they were seated and Emma was occupied with a pad of paper and colored pencils the assistant had provided. He said he had evidence of massive financial crimes involving Global Meridian, but needed time to compile everything and create secure backups. He leaned forward. Then he suddenly went silent 2 days ago. When my sources told me he'd boarded a plane to London yesterday, I assumed the worst, that he'd been compromised or scared off. Neither, Eleanor said, opening her handbag to extract the envelope and USB drives. He had to leave to protect himself, but he made arrangements to get everything to you through us. Walker's eyes widened as she placed the items on his desk. This is significant and potentially very dangerous for you. Did Jason explain exactly what he uncovered? Money laundering for criminal organizations, illegal weapons deals, corruption extending into regulatory agencies. Eleanor kept her voice low despite the closed door. I saw enough to understand why people might kill to keep it hidden. He nodded grimly. Global Meridian handles billions in investments, including pension funds for several state governments and major unions. If they've been using that legitimate business as cover for criminal enterprises... He left the implications hanging. How quickly can you publish? Eleanor asked, glancing at Emma to ensure she remained absorbed in her drawing. I'll need to verify key documents, run everything past our legal team, and get editorial approval. Walker was already examining the drives, his expression shifting from professional interest to something approaching awe as he scanned the contents. This is extraordinarily comprehensive. Jason didn't leave many loose ends. That's how he's always been? Eleanor said, a surge of maternal pride mixing with fear for her methodical, principled son. Thorough to a fault. With this level of documentation, we could publish an initial story online by tomorrow, print edition the following day. He looked up from his computer. But you and your granddaughter shouldn't be anywhere near Chicago when that happens. These people will be desperate once they realize what's coming. We're leaving as soon as we finish here, Eleanor assured him. Jason suggested a location where we can lay low until things settle. Walker nodded, then hesitated. Mrs. Baker, I've been investigating corporate corruption for 15 years. What your son has uncovered here isn't just unusual. It's unprecedented in its scope and the level of detail he managed to document. When this story breaks, it will trigger investigations in multiple countries, stock market chaos, probably congressional hearings. He trailed off, seemingly overwhelmed by the implications. Will it be enough? Eleanor asked, the teacher in her needing to know that this risk to her son, to Emma, to their safety and future would accomplish its purpose. Will they be held accountable? Some will. The highest profile executives certainly. Some of the government officials implicated. His expression turned realistic rather than reassuring. But systems this corrupt have self-preservation mechanisms. Some people will escape consequences. That's just the reality. Eleanor absorbed this with a nod, having taught enough history to understand how power protects itself. As long as it stops the worst of it, the weapons deals, the money laundering for terrorists, that has to end. It will, Walker promised. This story will make that inevitable. A knock at the door interrupted them. Walker's assistant poked her head in, her expression tense. There are 2 men in the lobby asking for security clearance to come up. They claim to be federal agents investigating financial crimes, but something seems off. Security is stalling them, but they're being insistent. Walker's reaction was immediate. We need to move you now. Is there anything else Jason wanted me to know? Eleanor shook her head, gathering her belongings while Walker quickly copied the drive's contents to his secure server. There's a service elevator that leads to the loading dock, he explained, returning the original drives to her. My assistant will take you down. I'll handle our visitors and buy you time. He crouched briefly to Emma's level. It was very nice meeting you, young lady. You and your grandmother are doing something very brave and important today. Emma smiled shyly. My daddy says sometimes you have to be brave even when you're scared. Your daddy is a wise man, Walker replied, a flicker of emotion crossing his face before he turned back to Eleanor. Go now. I'll contact you through the secure channel Jason established once the story is published. The assistant led them through a maze of hallways to a freight elevator tucked at the back of the floor. As the doors closed, Eleanor caught a glimpse of 2 men in dark suits stepping off the main elevator, their expressions grim and purposeful. They had escaped by mere moments. Victor Harmon's expression remained impassive as he flashed his corporate security badge at the Tribune guard, but internally he seethed. The baker woman had slipped through his fingers at the bank gone by the time his team arrived. Now she was somewhere in this building, potentially delivering evidence that could destroy everything they'd built. We have reason to believe one of your reporters is in possession of stolen corporate documents, he informed the security manager who had been summoned to the lobby. This is a matter of national security. The security manager looked skeptical. You said you were federal agents earlier. Now you're corporate security. Victor's colleague smoothly interjected. We're a special task force that works with corporations on matters of financial security. Our credentials are in order. I'll need to check with management, the security manager insisted. Please wait here. As soon as the manager walked away, Victor turned to his associate. They're stalling. She's already here. Split up, you take the executive floor. I'll check the investigative department. Look for Thomas Walker's office. By the time they were cleared to go upstairs, precious minutes had been lost. When they reached Walker's office, Victor knew immediately from the journalist's too casual demeanor that they were too late. Mr. Harmon, Walker greeted him with professional courtesy that didn't reach his eyes. Global Meridian's head of security, what brings you to the Tribune today? I think you know exactly why I'm here. Walker, Victor replied, scanning the office for any sign of Eleanor or Emma. Where are they? I'm afraid you'll need to be more specific, Walker said, leaning back in his chair with practiced ease. And perhaps explain why Global Meridian's security chief is so interested in tracking down private citizens. Victor leaned across the desk, dropping his voice. Listen carefully. You have no idea what you're getting involved with here. This goes far beyond a simple corporate scandal. There are national security implications. Is that a threat? Walker asked, his recorder visible on the desk between them. It's a reality check. Victor straightened. Whatever Eleanor Baker gave you, it's incomplete and taken out of context. If you publish without the full picture, you could compromise ongoing anti-terrorism operations. Walker's expression revealed nothing. Fascinating. I'll be sure to include your perspective when we run the story. Victor realized he'd miscalculated. Intimidation wouldn't work on a seasoned investigative journalist. He needed a different approach. When do you plan to publish? He asked, changing tactics. That's editorial information I'm not at liberty to share. Walker replied. Now, unless you have an on-the-record statement about Global Meridian's involvement in money laundering and illegal weapons deals, I have a deadline to meet. Victor nodded curtly and left the office, already calling his team as he headed for the elevator. They've delivered the evidence. Put out an all-points alert for the Baker woman and the child. Check all routes leaving the city. And get me everything we have on Jason Baker's family properties, vacation homes, relatives' addresses, anywhere they might go to ground. The loading dock yielded nothing. Eleanor and Emma were long gone. Victor stared at the busy Chicago street, calculating his next move. The story would break soon. They needed to contain the damage, which meant finding Jason Baker's family before they could deliver any additional evidence or testimony. The loading dock buzzed with activity delivery trucks arriving with paper supplies, cafeteria deliveries, mailroom staff sorting packages. Eleanor and Emma slipped through the organized chaos unnoticed, emerging onto a side street away from the main entrance. Ramon's taxi waited exactly where he had promised, 2 blocks south. As they hurried toward it, Eleanor fought the urge to look over her shoulder, knowing that appearing nervous would only draw attention they couldn't afford. "Did you finish your treasure hunt, little one?" Ramon asked as they settled into the back seat. "Not yet," Emma replied seriously. "We have one more place to go." "Then let us go there," he said, pulling smoothly into traffic. "Where to, Senora?" Eleanor hesitated only briefly. "We need to leave the city. Head north toward Wisconsin. I'll direct you as we go." As Chicago's skyline receded in the rear window, Eleanor pulled Emma close, allowing herself a moment of cautious optimism. They had completed Jason's mission. The evidence was in capable hands, soon to be public knowledge that couldn't be buried or denied. Now they just needed to disappear until the storm passed. "Grandma," Emma whispered against her side, "are we winning our game?" Eleanor stroked her hair, measuring her response carefully. "We're doing very well, sweetheart. Very well indeed." What she didn't tell Emma was that in games like this, games where powerful people stood to lose everything, the most dangerous moment often comes right before victory. They had landed a blow against their opponents, but they were far from defeated. And like wounded predators, they would be at their most dangerous now. The Illinois countryside unfolded beyond their windows as Ramon's taxi left the suburban sprawl behind. Familiar landscapes transformed into foreign territory through the lens of their new reality, every police car a potential threat, every black SUV a possible pursuer. Eleanor directed Ramon to avoid major highways, choosing instead the network of state and county roads that would make their journey longer but less predictable. "We should stop soon," she told him after they'd been driving for nearly 2 hours. "You've done more than enough, and I don't want to take you too far from your regular work." Ramon shook his head firmly. "Maria told me to help you, however needed. Besides, I have my nephew covering my shifts today." He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Where exactly are we going?" Eleanor hesitated, balancing trust against caution. "A cabin in northern Michigan, near Cedar Lake." "Michigan is far, Senora. At least 6 more hours, especially on these back roads." "I know. We'll find another way from here." Eleanor glanced at Emma, who had fallen asleep against her side, emotionally exhausted from their morning's adventures. "Perhaps a bus?" she mused aloud. "I have a better idea," Ramon interrupted, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. "My brother-in-law runs a small trucking company. They have a delivery going to Traverse City today. The driver is my cousin, Eduardo. He could take you most of the way." The offer was tempting. Truckers moved across state lines with minimal scrutiny, and the randomness of connecting with a vehicle already making the journey would be nearly impossible for pursuers to anticipate. Yet Eleanor hesitated, reluctant to involve more people in their dangerous situation. Ramon seemed to read her thoughts. "Eduardo asks no questions. He has made many such special deliveries for family and friends needing to travel quietly." Eleanor didn't press for details. The immigrant community had its own reasons for sometimes needing to move people discreetly, reasons she had come to understand and respect during her years working with Maria and her extended family. "If you're sure he wouldn't mind," she said finally. Ramon made a call in rapid Spanish, too quick for Eleanor's limited vocabulary to follow. After a brief conversation, he nodded with satisfaction. "It is arranged. Eduardo will meet us at a truck stop near Rockford in 1 hour. He delivers furniture to stores in northern Michigan. You and the little one can ride in the cab with him. Very comfortable, very safe." Eleanor squeezed his shoulder in gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you and Maria properly. You helped Maria's daughter get a college scholarship years ago," he replied simply. "In our family, we do not forget such kindnesses." The truck stop buzzed with the rhythms of highway commerce, big rigs refueling, drivers grabbing meals and coffee, travelers stretching their legs. Eleanor used some of Jason's cash to buy supply sandwiches, drinks, snacks for the journey ahead, plus a small backpack, basic toiletries, and a coloring book with crayons for Emma. Eduardo's truck was exactly as promised, a large commercial vehicle transporting furniture to retailers across Michigan. The driver himself was a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper beard and gentle eyes that crinkled when he smiled at Emma. "Ramon says you need to reach Cedar Lake," he said after brief introductions. "I deliver in Traverse City, about 45 minutes south of there." "Close enough, thank you." "Perfect," Eleanor agreed, relieved beyond measure. "And you're sure we're not imposing?" Eduardo waved away her concern. "The company pays for the fuel no matter what. Having passengers makes the journey less lonely." He grinned at Emma. "Especially passengers who might enjoy hearing truck driver stories." After tearful thanks and promises to let Maria know when they were safe, they parted ways with Ramon. Eduardo helped them into the surprisingly spacious cab of his truck, showing Emma the elevated sleeping compartment behind the seats that delighted her with its compact efficiency. "Like a little house on wheels," she exclaimed, bouncing slightly on the narrow bunk. As the massive truck rumbled onto the highway, Eleanor felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. They were moving further from danger with each mile, hidden within the anonymous flow of commercial traffic crisscrossing the country. For the first time since hearing Emma's whispered warning at the airport, she allowed herself to take a full, deep breath. Eduardo proved a considerate companion, entertaining Emma with carefully edited tales from his 20 years on the road while giving Eleanor space to process their situation. When he noticed her fatigue, he insisted she rest in the sleeping compartment while he and Emma continued their conversation in the front seats. Eleanor must have fallen into a deeper sleep than intended, because when she woke, the quality of light had changed dramatically. Golden afternoon sunshine slanted through the windows, and the landscape outside had transformed from Illinois farmland to the denser forests of Michigan. "Almost to Traverse City," Eduardo informed her as she rejoined them. "Another hour, perhaps." Emma was coloring contentedly, her previous fear seemingly forgotten in the adventure of riding in a big truck. Eleanor checked the prepaid phone from the safety deposit box. Still no messages, which was both reassuring and concerning. Had Jason reached London safely? Was he still in danger? "Can I ask a favor?" she said to Eduardo. "Could you perhaps find a news station on the radio I need to check if there's any relevant information?" He nodded knowingly, tuning the radio to a news channel where a broadcaster was mid-sentence. Stock plunging amid rumors of a major investigative report set to be published tomorrow. Global Meridian Investments has issued a statement denying any impropriety and calling the rumors baseless attacks designed to manipulate markets. Trading was temporarily halted after shares dropped 20% in afternoon trading. Financial analysts are speculating about. Eduardo changed the station at Eleanor's request, but the damage was done. Word was already leaking. The Tribune must have begun reaching out to Global Meridian for comment, setting the standard journalistic practice of allowing subjects to respond before publication. It also meant their pursuers now knew exactly what was coming. "Bad news?" Eduardo asked quietly, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Emma to indicate he wouldn't speak plainly in front of her. "Complicated news," Eleanor replied. "But it confirms we need to reach our destination as quickly as possible." He nodded, pressing the accelerator slightly. "I know some shortcuts." The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows when Eduardo finally pulled his truck into a small roadside diner about 30 miles north of Traverse City. "This is as far as my route allows," he explained apologetically. "But the owner here, Maggie, she can help. Her son drives a logging truck up near Cedar Lake. More connections, more strangers' kindness." It was as if Jason's trail of breadcrumbs had been supplemented by an unexpected network of support, materializing when they needed it most. Maggie proved to be a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who asked few questions after Eduardo's brief private explanation. Within an hour, her son Derek had arrived in his pickup truck, ready to drive them the final leg to Cedar Lake. As they thanked Eduardo and prepared to transfer to Derek's vehicle, Emma suddenly wrapped her arms around the truck driver's massive leg. "Thank you for the stories," she said solemnly, "and for helping us with our game." Eduardo knelt to her level, his weathered face gentle. "You are very welcome, little one. You be good for your abuela. Yes, she is very brave." The simple words caught in Eleanor's chest. not because they were particularly profound, but because they reflected how completely their reality had shifted. 2 days ago, she had been a retired teacher looking forward to a quiet week with her granddaughter while her son traveled for business. Now strangers were calling her brave as they helped them flee from dangerous men. As Derek's pickup rumbled north toward Cedar Lake and Jason's promised sanctuary, Eleanor wondered if she was, in fact, brave, or simply a grandmother with no other choice but to keep moving forward, one step at a time, toward whatever awaited them at the end of this increasingly dangerous road. Victor Harmon stared at his computer screen, methodically eliminating possibilities. The baker woman had vanished from Chicago, leaving no digital footprint, no credit card transactions, no phone activity, no sightings on traffic cameras along major highways. It was as if she'd learned counterintelligence techniques overnight, or as if she had professional help. His phone rang, displaying the CEO's private number. Victor steeled himself before answering. "Harmon, I just got word the Tribune is publishing tomorrow morning." The CEO's voice was tightly controlled. "Online at 6 a.m. Print edition hit stands by 7. They've already alerted regulatory authorities. Sir, save it. The board is meeting now. We're implementing the contingency plan. Destroy everything in Protocol Black and meet me at the airfield in 2 hours. And Baker, his mother and daughter." A pause. "Loose ends. Tie them off." The call ended. Victor sat motionless for a moment, weighing his options. The contingency plan meant the leadership was fleeing with their offshore accounts, leaving mid-level executives like him to face the music or to eliminate any remaining threads that could lead back to them. He opened his desk drawer and removed a secure phone, dialing a number from memory. "It's Harmon. I need a full team. Standard cleanup package. 3 targets." He listened briefly. "No, I have a lead on their location. Rural property in northern Michigan, Cedar Lake." He ended the call and began deleting files from his computer. The Baker family had just transitioned from a problem to solve to a liability to eliminate. It wasn't personal. It was survival. Cedar Lake materialized from the gathering dusk like a memory taking physical form, a smooth expanse of water reflecting the deepening blue of the evening sky, surrounded by dense pine forests that had been Eleanor's husband James's sanctuary for decades before his death. The small log cabin that had served as base camp for countless father-son fishing expeditions stood on a gentle rise overlooking the water, its windows dark and shuttered. Derek pulled his truck to a stop at the end of the rutted dirt road about 50 yards from the cabin. "This is as close as I can get," he explained. "Road washes out every spring, and no one's bothered to improve it." "This is perfect," Eleanor assured him, gathering their meager supplies. "You've been incredibly kind." He shrugged off her thanks with the casual modesty she was coming to associate with this impromptu underground railroad that had carried them from Chicago to northern Michigan. "Mom wouldn't have it any other way. You need anything while you're up here? There's a radio in the cabin. Channel 3 reaches our house if reception's good." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever trouble you're in, ma'am, I hope it passes soon." Eleanor nodded her appreciation, helping a sleepy Emma from the truck. They watched Derek's taillights disappear down the narrow road before turning toward the cabin that would be their refuge for how long days weeks Jason's instructions hadn't specified, and Eleanor realized with a slight chill that they were now truly on their own, cut off from both pursuers and allies. "Is this where Daddy and Grandpa used to fish?" Emma asked, suddenly more alert as she took in their surroundings. "Yes, sweetheart. They came here every summer when your dad was about your age." "Did you come too?" Eleanor shook her head, a bittersweet smile forming. "No, this was their special place. Just for them. I only came once, to help your grandpa close it up for winter the year before he died." That had been nearly 15 years ago, yet she remembered exactly where James had hidden the spare key beneath a distinctive red-streaked rock beside the back porch steps. Remarkably, it was still there, exactly as Jason had promised in his note. The cabin's interior was simple but well-maintained, a main room with a stone fireplace, small kitchen area, 2 bedrooms, and a basic bathroom with a shower that pulled water from the lake. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, but otherwise it appeared that someone, likely Jason, had ensured the place remained in good repair over the years. "It smells like pine trees inside, too," Emma observed as Eleanor lit the propane lamps, their warm glow creating dancing shadows on the log walls. "Your grandfather loved the smell of pine," Eleanor told her, grateful for the distraction of practical tasks checking the propane tank, starting the generator for electricity, finding linens for the beds. "He said it cleared his mind better than any medicine." Working together, they soon had the cabin reasonably comfortable. Eleanor located the promised radio and tested it briefly, receiving only static but confirming it had power. The kitchen cupboards contained basics canned goods, pasta, rice supplemented by the supplies they'd purchased at the truck stop. They would need to venture out for fresh food eventually, but not immediately. Once Emma was fed, bathed, and tucked into one of the narrow beds in the smaller bedroom, Eleanor allowed herself to truly consider their situation for the first time. The prepaid phone from the safety deposit box remained silent. No emergency contact from Jason. The cabin had no television or internet connection, leaving them completely isolated from news about either the Tribune's exposé or its fallout. Eleanor found herself standing at the window overlooking the lake, watching moonlight ripple across its surface, trying to quiet the questions circling in her mind. Had Thomas Walker successfully published the story? Had Global Meridian figured out who had delivered their secrets to the press? Was Jason safe in London? Or had their reach extended across oceans? Her reflection in the glass startled her, a tired-looking woman with silver hair and worried eyes. So different from the confident teacher who had accompanied her son and granddaughter to the airport just 36 hours earlier. That woman had lived in a world of lesson plans and book clubs, grocery lists and birthday cards. This woman existed in a shadow realm of coded messages and safe houses, pursued by nameless threats. A soft sound behind her broke her reverie, Emma padding into the main room in her borrowed pajamas. Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest. "I can't sleep," she said simply. "The bed feels funny." Eleanor opened her arms, and Emma came to her without hesitation, her small body warm against Eleanor's as she lifted her onto her lap in the old rocking chair beside the fireplace. "It's a new place," she acknowledged. "It takes time to get used to new places. When is Daddy coming back?" The question held no whine or complaint, just a child's straightforward desire to understand. Eleanor chose her words carefully. "As soon as he finishes his important work, he's counting on us to be brave and patient while he's gone." "Is he fighting bad guys like in my books?" The simple question captured the essence of their situation with unexpected clarity. "In a way, yes. Your dad discovered that some people at his company were doing very wrong things that hurt others. He's making sure they can't keep doing those things." Emma nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "That's why the men at the airport wanted to stop us, because we had Daddy's secret evidence." Eleanor shouldn't have been surprised by her comprehension. Children absorb far more than adults often credit, but her matter-of-fact summary still caught Eleanor off guard. "Yes," she admitted, "but we did exactly what your father asked us to do. We got the evidence to the right person, and now everyone will know the truth. And then we can go home." The innocent question pierced Eleanor's heart. She had no idea if they would ever return to their previous lives, if the exposure of Global Meridian's crimes would ensure their safety or mark them permanently as targets. The truth was, she didn't know what home would look like after this. "We'll be with your dad again," she promised instead. "That's what matters most." Emma accepted this, her eyelids growing heavy as Eleanor rocked gently back and forth. Within minutes, she had drifted back to sleep, her breathing deep and even, face peaceful in the lamplight. Eleanor continued rocking, reluctant to disturb her rest by moving her back to bed. Outside, an owl called across the lake, a haunting sound that seemed to echo the uncertainty of their future. Yet in that moment, with Emma's trusting weight against her, Eleanor felt an unexpected clarity of purpose. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or dangers they still faced, she would protect this child. Not just because she was her granddaughter, or because Jason had entrusted her to Eleanor's care, but because in a world where powerful people could casually authorize weapons deals that would kill thousands, or launder money for terrorists. Protecting innocence and truth became an act of defiance. Eleanor had spent decades teaching students about historical moments when ordinary people faced extraordinary choices. Now, in the quiet of a remote cabin with a sleeping child in her arms, she realized she had become one of those people, thrust by circumstance into a moment that would define not just her life, but potentially many others. The thought was terrifying and somehow strangely empowering. Morning arrived with startling beauty sunlight filtering through pine boughs, casting dappled patterns across the cabin floor, while birdsong filled the air outside. For a disorienting moment, Eleanor could almost believe they were simply on vacation, that Jason would emerge from the second bedroom yawning and asking about breakfast, that their greatest concern would be whether the fish were biting today. Reality reasserted itself when she checked the prepaid phone, still no messages, and automatically scanned the tree line for any sign of unexpected movement. Old habits from a mere 2 days of life on the run already ingrained as if she'd lived this way for years. Emma, however, embraced their new environment with the adaptability of childhood. After a breakfast of oatmeal and canned peaches, she explored the cabin with delight, discovering fishing tackle in a closet, board games with missing pieces under a bed, and a collection of field guides to local wildlife that captured her immediate interest. "Grandma, can we go looking for birds?" she asked, showing Eleanor detailed illustrations of chickadees and nuthatches. "The book says there are lots here." Eleanor hesitated, torn between caution and the need to maintain some semblance of normality for Emma's sake. The cabin was isolated, the nearest neighbor at least a mile away according to her memory of James's descriptions. Surely a short walk along the lakeshore would be safe enough. "We'll stay close to the cabin," she decided, helping Emma into her jacket. "And if I say we need to go back, we go immediately. No questions." Emma nodded solemnly, accepting these terms with the seriousness of their ongoing game. Together they ventured outside, keeping to the tree line where they could quickly retreat to cover if necessary. The spring air carried a lingering chill, but sunshine warmed their faces as they walked slowly along the shore, Emma clutching her bird guide and pointing excitedly at each flutter of wings. Eleanor found herself simultaneously hypervigilant and oddly at peace, scanning constantly for threats while absorbing the simple joy of watching her granddaughter discover something new. Was this how mothers in war zones felt during brief moments of normality? This dissonant blend of danger and domestic tranquility, they had identified 7 different bird species and collected an assortment of interesting rocks when the distant sound of a vehicle engine sent ice through Eleanor's veins. She grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her toward the trees. "Inside, now," she whispered, all senses suddenly heightened. They hurried back to the cabin, entering through the rear door and securing it behind them. Eleanor positioned Emma in the smaller bedroom, away from windows. "Stay here until I come get you," she instructed, keeping her voice calm despite the pounding of her heart. "Remember how we practiced being very quiet?" Emma nodded, clutching Mr. Whiskers tightly, her eyes wide but trusting. Eleanor moved silently to the front window, positioning herself to see without being seen. A pickup truck, older model, rusted around the wheel wells, had stopped at the end of the dirt road. A single figure emerged, an older man in flannel and work boots, carrying what appeared to be a paper grocery bag. Relief flooded through Eleanor as she recognized Derek's description of his father, the property caretaker who checked on the cabin periodically. Still, she maintained caution, watching as he approached and knocked firmly on the front door. "Mrs. Baker," he called. "It's Jim Lawson." "Derek sent me with some supplies." Eleanor retrieved Emma before answering, unwilling to let her out of her sight even for a moment. Together, they opened the door to find a weathered man in his 70s with kind eyes and a face creased from decades of outdoor work. "Didn't mean to startle you folks," he said, holding out the grocery bag. "Derek mentioned you might need some fresh things, milk, eggs, bread. My wife sent along a casserole, too." "That's incredibly thoughtful," Eleanor said, accepting the bag gratefully. "Please thank her for us." Jim nodded, his eyes taking in the cabin with professional assessment. "Place holding up okay. Haven't been up to check it much this past winter." "It's perfect," Eleanor assured him. "Your maintenance has kept it in wonderful condition. He seemed pleased by this, then hesitated before adding, "Don't mean to pry, ma'am, but Derek mentioned you might be in some kind of trouble. Anything we should be watching for strangers asking questions, that sort of thing." The direct question caught Eleanor off guard, but his straightforward manner suggested genuine concern rather than prying curiosity. "It's complicated," she admitted. "But yes, there might be people looking for us. If anyone asks, nobody's seen you." He finished with a knowing nod. "That's what I figured. Folks around here mind their own business. But we look out for each other, too." He glanced at Emma, who was half hidden behind Eleanor's legs. "You two sit tight. I'll swing by every couple days with supplies. Anything specific you need. Just leave a note under that flower pot on the porch." After he departed, Eleanor found herself unexpectedly moved by this continued chain of kindnesses from strangers, each person doing their small part without demanding explanations or passing judgment. It stood in stark contrast to the corporate criminals Jason had exposed, whose massive resources and connections were being used to protect their ability to profit from suffering. The day passed slowly, marked by simple activities to keep Emma engaged: board games, reading from the cabin's small collection of paperbacks, identifying more birds through the windows. Eleanor rationed their use of the generator to preserve fuel, relying instead on natural light and propane lamps as evening approached. After dinner, she tried the radio again, this time successfully connecting to the frequency Derek had mentioned. His voice crackled through the static, confirming that his father had made contact and asking if they needed anything else. Eleanor requested newspapers, any national publications they could find, and he promised to send them with the next supply delivery. Night fell, bringing with it a profound silence unlike anything in their suburban life. Eleanor put Emma to bed with another story about her father's childhood fishing adventures at this very lake, then settled into the rocking chair with a kerosene lamp, one of James's old mystery novels open in her lap, though her eyes rarely focused on the words. Around midnight, the prepaid phone finally chirped. A single text message from an unlisted number: story published. Global Meridian stock suspended. FBI raided headquarters. Stay put. Contact coming in 3 days. All safe for now. The terse message told Eleanor nothing about Jason's personal safety, but confirmed their mission had succeeded. Thomas Walker had published the exposé, and the wheels of justice, however imperfect, had begun to turn. Eleanor allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before the implications of contact coming in 3 days registered. Someone would be arriving at the cabin, someone Jason trusted enough to send to them. 3 more days of waiting, of jumping at every sound, of maintaining a brave face for Emma while her own anxiety simmered beneath the surface. 3 more days before they would learn what came next in this unexpected chapter of their lives. She checked all doors and windows one final time before attempting sleep. The loaded rifle she'd found in the cabin's closet now propped beside her bed. James had taught her to shoot decades ago, a skill she'd never imagined needing until now. As Eleanor drifted toward uneasy sleep, she found herself cataloging the changes in herself since that moment at the airport. The Eleanor Baker who had arrived at this cabin was not the same woman who had heard her granddaughter's whispered warning. That woman had lived a life defined by predictable routines and reasonable expectations. This woman, the one lying awake with a rifle within reach, had discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed: decisiveness under pressure, strategic thinking, the ability to navigate danger while protecting what mattered most. Whether these changes were improvements or simply necessary adaptations to extraordinary circumstances remained to be seen. But as she finally succumbed to exhaustion, one certainty remained: she was no longer merely reacting to events beyond her control. She was becoming an active participant in whatever story was still unfolding, for better or worse. The newspapers arrived the following day, delivered by Jim along with more supplies and a battery-powered radio. The headlines confirmed what the text message had suggested. Global Meridian implicated in massive financial crimes dominated the front pages, accompanied by photos of FBI agents carrying boxes from the company's Chicago headquarters. Thomas Walker's byline appeared prominently, his carefully crafted exposé laying out the evidence Jason had gathered with devastating precision. The article detailed money laundering operations for drug cartels and terrorist organizations, illegal weapons deals that violated international sanctions, and systematic bribery of regulatory officials. Several high-ranking executives had already been arrested, while others, including the CEO, were reportedly cooperating with federal authorities in exchange for leniency. "Is that Daddy's company?" Emma asked, peering over Eleanor's shoulder at the newspaper spread across the kitchen table. "Yes," Eleanor answered, quickly folding the paper to hide the more disturbing details. "Your father helped the reporters understand some very complicated things that were happening there." Emma nodded, accepting this simplified explanation. "That's why we're having our adventure. So the bad guys couldn't stop him." "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed, once again impressed by her perception. "And it worked. Your dad's evidence is helping a lot of people now." The days passed with agonizing slowness, their isolation both protection and prison. Eleanor maintained a routine for Emma's sake meals at regular times, nature walks staying close to the cabin, reading and games in the evenings. The battery radio brought news updates that Eleanor listened to after Emma was asleep, absorbing the growing scandal as Global Meridian's crimes captured national attention. Congressional hearings were being scheduled. International arrest warrants had been issued for executives who had fled the country. Client funds were frozen pending investigation, yet nowhere in the coverage was there any mention of Jason Baker, the whistleblower who had made it all possible a deliberate omission, Eleanor assumed, to protect him from retaliation. On the morning of the third day, Eleanor woke before dawn, tension coiling through her at the prospect of their expected visitor. Who would Jason send? How would they find us? What news would they bring? She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that would allow for quick movement if necessary, and positioned herself on the porch with a cup of coffee and James's old binoculars. Emma still slept peacefully inside, unaware of the significance of this particular day. The sun had just cleared the tree line when Eleanor spotted movement on the dirt road, not a vehicle, but a single figure on foot, approaching steadily. She retrieved the rifle from inside the door, keeping it visible but not directly aimed. As the visitor drew closer, the morning mist partially obscured their features, but Eleanor could make out a woman of medium height carrying a backpack, dressed for hiking in practical boots and layers. As she came within 50 yards, recognition hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Samantha Reed, Jason's ex-wife and Emma's mother. Eleanor lowered the rifle immediately, shock and confusion warring within her. Samantha had moved to California after the divorce 2 years ago, establishing a new life that included minimal involvement with her daughter. Monthly video calls and holiday visits constituted the extent of her parenting, with primary custody granted to Jason and Eleanor serving as secondary caregiver when his work required travel. "Eleanor," she called, raising a hand in greeting as she approached the porch. "It's just me." Eleanor set the rifle aside, moving to meet her at the bottom of the steps. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her normally immaculate appearance rumpled from travel. "Samantha," Eleanor responded, still processing her unexpected arrival. "How did you—" "Jason arranged everything," Samantha interrupted, dropping her backpack to the ground. "He contacted me 5 days ago, explained what was happening. I've been traveling under a false name, using cash only, changing transportation methods every few hours." A humorless laugh escaped her. Apparently those crime novels he always read came in handy for planning fugitive logistics. Before Eleanor could respond, the cabin door flew open and Emma burst onto the porch, her face transforming with disbelieving joy. "Mommy," she cried, practically tumbling down the steps in her haste. Samantha knelt, opening her arms as Emma crashed into her embrace. "Hey, Bug," she said, using the nickname she'd given her daughter as an infant. "I've missed you so much." Eleanor stepped back, giving them space for their reunion while trying to realign her understanding of their situation. Samantha's presence changed everything, raised new questions, created new possibilities and complications. After the emotional greetings subsided, they moved inside where Samantha accepted coffee and began filling in the considerable gaps in Eleanor's understanding. "Jason contacted me through an old email account we kept for emergencies," she explained, warming her hands on the mug. "He knew they'd be monitoring his usual communications, but this address was from before we were married. no connection to his current identity. "He told you everything?" Eleanor asked, still processing the implications. Samantha nodded. "About the money laundering, the weapons deals, all of it. He said he couldn't warn you directly because they were watching him too closely, but he knew you'd protect Emma if he gave her the right instructions." A flicker of something regret, shame crossed her face. "He trusted you completely, said you were the strongest person he knew." Emma had settled against her mother's side, clearly unwilling to break physical contact after their long separation. Eleanor sent her to wash up and change clothes, needing a moment to speak with Samantha privately. "Where is he now?" she asked once Emma was out of earshot. "Is he safe?" Samantha glanced toward the hallway before lowering her voice. "He never went to London. The ticket was a diversion. He's been in Canada, working with international authorities to track the offshore accounts." She hesitated, then continued. "The reason he sent me here is we need to move. All of us. Tonight." The calm Eleanor had cultivated over the past days shattered instantly. "Why, what's happened?" "The investigation is revealing connections beyond what even Jason anticipated. Government officials, intelligence agencies, foreign interests all compromised. Some very powerful people are facing prison or worse, and they've traced the leak back to Jason." Her eyes met Eleanor's, fear evident despite her controlled tone. "They've identified his family as leverage. There was an incident at my apartment in California. Men broke in, ransacked the place. Jason's contact in the FBI says they're narrowing the search, focusing on properties with family connections." Cold dread settled in Eleanor's stomach. "This cabin is registered to James' estate," Samantha confirmed grimly. "It's only a matter of time before they find it in property records. Jason says we have to leave tonight, meet his contact at the Canadian border. They have new identities prepared, a place for us to stay until the immediate danger passes." The magnitude of what she was describing, abandoning their entire lives, possibly permanently struck Eleanor with physical force. She sank into a chair, trying to process this new reality. "How long?" she managed finally. "How long until we can come back?" Samantha's expression softened with sympathy. "Jason doesn't know. Months at minimum. Possibly longer." The unspoken possibly never hung in the air between them. Eleanor thought of her home filled with decades of memories, her friends, the community she'd built over a lifetime, all of it potentially lost because her son had chosen to expose corruption at the highest levels. "I know it's overwhelming," Samantha said quietly, "but we don't have a choice. Eleanor, these people have reached the desperate stage where they have nothing left to lose. If they can't silence Jason directly, they'll use us to force his hand." Eleanor looked toward the hallway where Emma's happy humming drifted from the bathroom, blissfully unaware that her world was about to be upended yet again. "Then we leave tonight," she said, her resolve hardening around the one certainty that remained constant through all these changes. Protecting her family came before everything else. "Tell me what we need to do." Dusk settled over Cedar Lake as they made their final preparations. Samantha's instructions were precise. Take only what they could carry in backpacks. Dress in layers. Bring the minimum identification necessary. Everything else would be left behind. The cabin itself would be made to look temporarily abandoned rather than hastily fled, buying them precious time if their pursuers tracked them this far. Eleanor moved through the small rooms with bittersweet efficiency, erasing traces of their presence while preserving the illusion that they might return any day. Beds were left rumpled but not stripped. Dishes were washed but left in the drying rack. Fishing gear was positioned near the door as if ready for tomorrow's expedition. "Grandma, why do we have to leave at night?" Emma asked as Eleanor helped her pack her few belongings. "Isn't it harder to see?" "That's exactly why," Eleanor explained, folding her extra sweater into a compact bundle. "Sometimes it's safer when people can't see you clearly. Like hide and seek in the dark." "Very much like that," Eleanor agreed, grateful for her ability to frame their desperate flight as another phase of their ongoing game. Samantha entered with an armful of food items packed into Ziploc bags. "The contact says to bring provisions for 24 hours. We'll have about a 6-hour hike to reach the rendezvous point. 6 hours through the forest at night." Eleanor couldn't keep the concern from her voice. With a 7-year-old, Jason planned the route carefully, Samantha assured her. It follows game trails most of the way, avoids major elevation changes, and keeps to terrain that's manageable even in low light. He used to hunt in these woods with his father. Remember? Eleanor did remember James and Jason disappearing for weekends during deer season, returning with detailed stories of their woodland adventures, regardless of whether they'd actually caught anything. Those expeditions had given her son an intimate knowledge of the backcountry that now might save their lives. The alternative is driving, Samantha continued, which means roads, checkpoints, potential witnesses. The Canadian border is surprisingly porous in these remote areas if you know where to cross on foot. The casual way she referenced illegal border crossing highlighted how completely their world had shifted. 3 weeks ago, Eleanor would have been appalled at the suggestion. Now it seemed not just reasonable but necessary. By 10:30 p.m., darkness had fully claimed the forest. They doused all lights in the cabin and waited another hour to ensure their night vision was fully adjusted before beginning their journey. Emma, initially excited by the prospect of a night adventure, had grown quieter as the reality of leaving the cabin's safety set in. "Will we ever come back here?" she asked as Eleanor adjusted her small backpack over her shoulders. The question pierced Eleanor with its simple directness. She considered offering reassurance, then decided on honesty instead. "I don't know, sweetheart, but what matters most is that we're together. You, me, and your mom. Places can be left behind, but people are what make a real home." She absorbed this with characteristic seriousness, then reached for Eleanor's hand. "I'm ready." Samantha led the way, navigating with a red-filtered headlamp that preserved their night vision while providing just enough illumination to follow the narrow trail. Eleanor took the rear position with Emma between them. The forest enveloped them immediately, a dense world of sounds and scents, accentuated by the darkness. Owls called overhead. Small creatures rustled in the underbrush, and the sweet, resinous scent of pine surrounded them like nature's perfume. They moved slowly but steadily, stopping every 30 minutes for brief rests and water. Emma maintained an impressive pace for her age, though Eleanor could see fatigue beginning to show after the second hour. Without complaint, Samantha lifted her onto her back for stretches of the journey, mother and daughter working together with a synchronicity that belied their typically distant relationship. Near the halfway point, Samantha called a longer break beside a small stream. As Emma dozed against Eleanor's shoulder, Samantha and Eleanor shared a moment of unexpected connection. "I've been a terrible mother," she said quietly, staring into the darkness beyond their small circle of filtered light. "Pursuing my career in California while Jason raised our daughter." "You made choices that seemed right at the time," Eleanor replied, surprised by her sudden vulnerability. Samantha shook her head. "I abandoned them. Let's call it what it was." Her voice carried no self-pity, just stark assessment. "I told myself Emma was better off with Jason. He was always the more natural parent. That I was building a better future by establishing my practice. That weekly video calls were enough." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Now look at us. No careers, no homes. Running for our lives because Jason had the courage to do the right thing when I was busy building my perfect life 3,000 miles away." Eleanor considered her words carefully before responding. "We all have regrets, Samantha, but right now, you're here when it matters most. That counts for something." "Does it?" she asked, genuine uncertainty in her voice. "Can you repair years of absence in a crisis?" "You'd be surprised what crisis reveals about relationships," Eleanor offered. "When everything else is stripped away, the core either holds or it doesn't." Their conversation ended as Emma stirred, and they resumed their journey with renewed purpose. The night deepened around them, the forest growing denser as they moved further from established trails. Twice, Samantha paused to consult a hand-drawn map, making slight adjustments to their course. Near dawn, they reached a small clearing where the trees thinned enough to reveal the first hints of approaching daylight. Samantha checked her watch and nodded with satisfaction. "We're making good time. The rendezvous point is about 40 minutes ahead, a small hunting cabin just south of the border. From there, our contact will guide us across and to transportation on the Canadian side." "Who is this contact?" Eleanor asked. the question that had been bothering her for hours finally surfacing. How can Jason be certain they're trustworthy? He wouldn't tell me. Said it was safer if I didn't know until we met them. She adjusted her pack, grimacing slightly at the weight. But he was confident said it was someone from his past that he trusted with his life. And ours. They pushed forward as the forest gradually brightened around them, birds awakening to greet the new day with chorus. Emma, initially energized by the approaching dawn, began to flag noticeably. Eleanor carried her for the final stretch, her small body heavy against Eleanor's back, but her trust a greater weight on her heart. The hunting cabin appeared suddenly a crude one-room structure, nearly reclaimed by the surrounding vegetation. No smoke rose from its chimney. No light shone from its single window. But Samantha approached with confidence. "Hello?" she called softly, tapping lightly on the weathered door. "We're the Baker family." Silence answered, stretching uncomfortably until Eleanor began to wonder if they'd somehow missed their connection. Then the door creaked open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the dim interior. "Right on time," a woman's voice observed, stepping into the morning light. "Jason said you'd be punctual." Recognition hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. The woman, slim, athletic, with gray-streaked dark hair cropped short, had aged 2 decades since Eleanor had last seen her, but her identity was unmistakable. "Alicia," she whispered, nearly stumbling in shock. Alicia Reynolds, Jason's college girlfriend, who had abruptly disappeared from his life during their senior year after being recruited by an unnamed government agency. The relationship that had broken her son's heart and set him on a completely different life path than he'd planned. "Hello, Eleanor," she replied with a slight smile. "It's been a long time." "You know each other?" Samantha asked, confusion evident in her voice. "We did once," Alicia confirmed, gesturing them inside. "A lifetime ago, before I became someone else entirely." As they entered the cabin, Eleanor struggled to integrate this new piece into the already complex puzzle of their situation. Jason's cryptic message about someone from his past took on new significance. Had he maintained contact with Alicia all these years, or had their paths crossed again through the twisted connections of Global Meridian's corruption? The cabin's interior was Spartan but prepared for their arrival: bottled water, energy bars, a first aid kit, and most surprisingly, a satellite phone that looked significantly more advanced than civilian technology. "We don't have much time," Alicia said, all business now as she checked her watch. "Border Patrol changes shifts in 90 minutes. That's our window to cross undetected." Emma, observing this new development with wide eyes, tugged at Eleanor's sleeve. "Grandma, who is she?" Eleanor knelt to her level, finding simple words for a complicated situation. "Someone who knew your daddy a long time ago. Someone who's going to help us find him." "That's right," Alicia confirmed, softening her tone as she addressed Emma directly. "Your dad and I were good friends once, and now I'm going to make sure you all get somewhere safe." As she outlined the next phase of their journey, a 2-mile hike to the border, crossing at a specific unmanned section, then another mile to a waiting vehicle, Eleanor found herself wondering what other surprises awaited them on this extraordinary path they'd been forced to travel. From a whispered warning in an airport to an international escape coordinated by a long-lost girlfriend turned covert operative, nothing in Eleanor's 68 years had prepared her for any of this. Yet here she stood, ready to follow this ghost from her son's past into yet another unknown. Because when protecting family, there is no map too complex, no journey too daunting, no ally too unexpected. The border crossing proceeded with practiced efficiency. Alicia guided them along game trails so faint they were nearly invisible, her movements betraying years of fieldcraft that Eleanor could only imagine. They maintained silence except for essential communication, with Emma understanding the gravity of their situation despite her age. Following instructions without question. "See that line of rocks?" Alicia whispered, pointing to an unremarkable arrangement of stones that seemed natural to Eleanor's untrained eye. "That's the border. Once we cross, we're in Canada. Different jurisdiction, different pursuers. Gives us an advantage, at least temporarily." "Will they follow us?" Samantha asked, adjusting Emma's hood against the morning chill. "Eventually," Alicia confirmed. But international coordination takes time, even for organizations with their resources. That delay is what we're counting on. They crossed the invisible line between nations with no ceremony, no acknowledgement beyond Alicia's brief nod of satisfaction. The forest on the Canadian side looked identical, the same pines, the same underbrush, the same birdsong. Yet knowing they had left American soil created a psychological shift Eleanor couldn't quite articulate. Another hour of hiking brought them to a narrow dirt road where a nondescript SUV waited, partially concealed by overhanging branches. A man leaned against the vehicle, straightening as they approached. Alicia raised her hand in greeting, and he responded with a casual salute that suggested military background. "This is Marcus," Alicia introduced briefly. "He'll drive the first leg. No questions, please." Marcus nodded to them without speaking, helping load their backpacks into the vehicle before holding the door as they climbed in. Emma, exhausted from their night journey, fell asleep almost immediately against Samantha's side. Eleanor found herself fighting similar fatigue, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally ebbing now that they had reached this milestone. "You should rest," Alicia advised from the front passenger seat as Marcus drove smoothly along back roads, avoiding main highways. "It's another 6 hours to the safe house." "Where are we going?" Eleanor asked, needing some anchor in this sea of uncertainty. "A property outside Montreal, remote, secure, off official records." She turned slightly, meeting Eleanor's eyes. "Jason is waiting there." The simple statement jolted Eleanor fully awake. "Jason's in Montreal. I thought he was in London." "We maintained that fiction deliberately," Alicia explained. Even with Samantha, the fewer people who knew his actual location, the safer for everyone. Samantha stirred beside Eleanor. "You lied to me." "Jason lied to you," Alicia corrected without apology. "Operational security. If you had been captured and questioned, you couldn't reveal what you didn't know." The cold calculation behind such planning, the layers of deception, the contingencies for capture and interrogation painted Eleanor's son in a light she'd never considered before. The methodical accountant she'd raised had orchestrated an international whistleblowing operation and escape plan worthy of an intelligence agency. "How do you fit into all this?" Eleanor asked Alicia directly. "After 20 years of silence, you suddenly appear as Jason's trusted contact." Something flickered across her face, regret, perhaps, or simply recognition of the complexity of her role. "It wasn't sudden. Eleanor, Jason and I reconnected 3 years ago when my agency was investigating financial irregularities that intersected with Global Meridian's operations." "Your agency." "I can't be more specific," she replied with practiced neutrality. "But when Jason realized what he had discovered, he reached out through channels we had established during that investigation. What he found went far beyond our initial concerns. The weapons dealing alone crossed multiple international jurisdictions. The landscape outside their windows gradually transformed from dense forest to scattered farmland as they continued eastward." Emma slept on, her face peaceful in unconsciousness, blissfully unaware of the international intrigue surrounding her father's actions. "Does she know?" Eleanor asked Samantha quietly, nodding toward their granddaughter. "About her father's relationship with Alicia." Samantha shook her head. "Jason never mentioned her to me, not even when we were married. Whatever happened between them was something he kept completely private." The journey continued in relative silence, with brief stops only when absolutely necessary for restrooms or to switch vehicles, a precaution Alicia insisted upon despite no obvious signs of pursuit. By late afternoon, they had reached the outskirts of Montreal, then continued north into increasingly rural territory. As dusk approached, Marcus turned onto a narrow gravel road that wound through thick woods for several miles before opening onto a clearing where a substantial log home stood, smoke curling invitingly from its chimney. Eleanor's heart raced as they pulled up to the house, scanning the porch and windows for any sign of Jason. The front door opened as Marcus cut the engine. A figure stepped out tall, familiar despite the beard he'd grown since Eleanor had last seen him, and her breath caught in her throat. "Daddy!" Emma's cry shattered the moment as she bolted from the car, suddenly wide awake and running full tilt toward her father. Jason caught her in mid-leap, spinning her around as she wrapped her arms around his neck. The raw emotion on his face, joy, relief, Love told its own story of the sacrifice and worry he'd endured during their separation. Eleanor and Samantha approached more slowly, both overwhelmed in their own ways by this reunion that had seemed increasingly improbable with each passing day. When Jason finally set Emma down, he embraced Samantha briefly before turning to Eleanor. "Mom," he said simply, his voice breaking slightly as he pulled her into a tight hug. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did what you asked," Eleanor replied, her own voice unsteady. "Though your instructions could have been a bit more detailed." A surprised laugh escaped him, the first genuine moment of lightness in this entire ordeal. "I'll remember that for the next international corruption scandal I expose." Inside, the house revealed itself to be both comfortable and strategically designed large windows offering clear sight lines to all approaches, multiple exit points, a basement level that could serve as a bunker if needed. Someone had prepared for their arrival with homemade soup simmering on the stove and beds made up with fresh linens. After Emma had been fed, bathed, and settled into a bedroom with both parents taking turns telling her bedtime stories, Jason, Alicia, and Eleanor gathered in the main room. The weight of unanswered questions hung between them, demanding address now that the immediate crisis of their escape had been resolved. "I owe you both explanations," Jason acknowledged, pouring 3 glasses of whiskey and passing them around. "Where to begin?" "The beginning would be traditional," Eleanor suggested, taking a seat by the fire. "How did a financial director at an investment firm stumble onto international crime that warranted all this?" She gestured around them at their current circumstance. Jason sighed, the sound carrying the burden of months of secrets. "It started with discrepancies in our humanitarian investment fund, small inconsistencies that wouldn't trigger standard audits, but caught my attention because of their pattern. When I investigated, I found a shadow accounting system tracking the actual movement of funds to entities on international terrorism watch lists. And instead of walking away, you dug deeper," Alicia added, her tone suggesting both admiration and exasperation. "I couldn't just ignore it." Jason defended. "Once I understood what was happening, that Global Meridian was using humanitarian aid as cover for weapons deals in conflict zones, that we were essentially profiting from both causing and alleviating suffering, I had to document everything." "At extraordinary risk to yourself," Eleanor observed. "And ultimately to us," his expression clouded with guilt. "I never intended to involve either of you. The plan was to compile the evidence, secure it off-site, then deliver it to Thomas Walker myself before disappearing. But they started watching me too closely. Every communication, every movement monitored. So you used Emma as your messenger," Eleanor said, unable to keep a hint of judgment from her voice. "A 7-year-old child." "It was Alicia's suggestion," he admitted, glancing toward her. "Children are often invisible in security calculations. No one would suspect I'd entrust critical information to my daughter." Alicia met Eleanor's questioning gaze directly. "It was the safest option among bad choices. Eleanor, these people had already killed the CFO when he raised questions about certain transactions. Jason was next on their list. They were just gathering replacement options before eliminating him." The blunt assessment sent a chill through Eleanor despite the fire's warmth. "And now what happens now that the evidence is public, that arrests are being made?" Jason and Alicia exchanged a look that communicated volumes about shared knowledge. "We've dealt a significant blow," Jason explained carefully. "But what you've seen in the news represents only the most visible players. There are others, government officials, intelligence assets, military contractors whose names weren't in the files I leaked because their connections were too well obscured. Meaning we're still in danger," Eleanor concluded. "Meaning we need to disappear," he corrected gently. "All of us, new identities, new location, new lives, at least until the full investigation concludes and all principals are accounted for." The magnitude of this statement, the complete abandonment of their former lives, settled over Eleanor like a physical weight. She thought of her home filled with decades of memories, her friends, her community, all left behind without proper goodbyes. "For how long?" she asked, the question that had haunted her since Samantha's arrival at the cabin. Jason and Alicia exchanged another glance before he answered. "Minimum of 2 years, possibly longer. 2 years, Eleanor repeated, the number simultaneously shocking and yet somehow less devastating than the forever she had feared. And then, best case scenario, the investigation concludes successfully, all major players are prosecuted, and we can return with reasonable safety measures, Alicia outlined. Worst case, the corruption proves too deeply embedded, too protected by powerful interests, and a return becomes too dangerous to risk. Eleanor absorbed this assessment, searching for the right question among the hundreds swirling in her mind. Where will we go? New Zealand, Jason answered. Remote enough to be secure, stable government, English speaking, good educational system for Emma. His expression softened. We've secured a small farm property. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable. Room for all of us. All of us, including Samantha, Eleanor couldn't help asking, glancing toward the hallway where she was still with Emma. That's her choice, Jason replied carefully. But yes, arrangements have been made if she chooses to come. Emma needs both her parents now more than ever. Eleanor nodded, understanding the priority of keeping their granddaughter's world as stable as possible despite everything else that had changed. And you, she asked Alicia. I'll oversee the transition, she answered. Ensure the new identities hold, that you're safely established. Then I return to my work. The conversation continued late into the night, filling in the considerable gaps in Eleanor's understanding how Jason had gathered the evidence, how Alicia had helped create their escape route, how the safe house in New Zealand had been secured through channels that couldn't be traced back to any of them. As midnight approached, exhaustion finally claimed Eleanor. Jason showed her to a comfortable bedroom, lingering at the door as she prepared to close it. I never properly thanked you, he said quietly. What you did protecting Emma, delivering the evidence, evading professional pursuers, it was extraordinary. I'm her grandmother, Eleanor replied simply. And your mother? There was no other choice, he smiled, the expression reminiscent of the little boy who had once looked at her with the same unwavering faith. Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew. I never fully understood what he meant until now. After he left, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, contemplating the journey that had brought her here and the one still to come. 2 years minimum in a foreign country, living under an assumed identity, leaving behind everything familiar, a complete reinvention at 68 years old. Yet, as she prepared for sleep in this temporary safe haven with her son, granddaughter, and even her former daughter-in-law all under one roof, Eleanor realized that what truly mattered had not been left behind at all. The essential core remained intact: her family, her values, her capacity to face whatever challenges lay ahead. From that first whispered warning in the airport, "He's gone. We need to leave now," to this moment of temporary sanctuary, she had been transformed not just by circumstances beyond her control, but by her own choices in response to those circumstances. She had discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed, courage she had never needed to test, and a resolve that would now carry them forward into their uncertain future. Whatever waited in New Zealand, whatever new life they would build there, Eleanor would face it with the same determination that had brought them safely to this moment. Not just a grandmother protecting her family, but a woman who had stared down danger and found herself equal to its challenge. A woman who had heard a child's warning and changed everything.